Every day the kids just kind of had the run of the town.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there wasn't much grass in our yard. There were baseball games and tag and one old box elder tree. Bark was smooth on it. Kids sliding up and down that.
Now, were you born in Elkhorn or were you born in Morrison? You were born in Elkhorn.
Yeah, Seal was born out in
Yeah.
Morrison. Yeah, no, I was born in Elkhorn. I can remember one thing that I always liked in the wintertime in bed, and hear those old Union Pacific trains, you know, they'd get water in the valley. If they were pulling a lot of load sometimes, they wouldn't get much speed up between Valley and Elkhorn coming up out of the Elkhorn bottom. And they'd get about halfway up, you know, driver would slip, you know, and they'd choke her down and they'd come on again, chug, and he'd slip. And that was, I always enjoyed listening.
Well, railroads were really a part of Elkhorn, weren't
Oh, yeah.
they?
The Union Pacific, see, that was the main line through there. And I can remember when the Pacific Fruit Express used to come pounding through there. Well, I'll tell you, they took precedent to mail trains and everything else.
They were coming from California to Point East.
Yeah, Chicago and New York. Yeah. And they had good mail service then, you know. They picked the mail up on the fly. Up in one of these farms, they'd hook it off of. One time, Dad would get so damn mad. They'd come through there and kick the mail off. And we'd be unloading lumber down there along the tracks, you know, and this train would come with a team and wagon. And this one time, we came down there and they kicked that mail out, and this mare, she saw it coming, she just raised up and jumped right over it. After that, they had to watch them a little bit, but before that, they wouldn't pay any attention.
How long did they use a team down at the lumber yard to handle all their work down there?
Oh, I don't know. I remember they had I think they still use the team some after they got a Model T truck. They had one of these plywood cabs on it. I don't know if you remember seeing those things.
And what kind of horses were they?
Percherons, couple of blacks, gentle old devils,
What were their names?
Pete and Kate.
I remember Dad talking about those.
Yeah. Yeah, he worked in the yard down there. Drove them quite a bit. You know, Bill wasn't very tall. And it was quite a chore for him to get the harness up on the tall horse. And Pete, the gelding, he was kind of an ornery devil. And he got wise when Bill had come in on the left side, you know. He'd just move over and squeeze him up against the side of the stall. Bill was complaining to Dad about it. And Dad says, well, aren't you any smarter than a horse? So Bill, he did get smart. He took a piece of broomstick about that long, sharpened one end of it. He carried the horse with the harness in there. He held that up like this. Old Pete shoved him over, got jabbed in the ribs. It only took one time.
That's the end of that.
So Ida, then your family must have farmed with horses?
Oh, yes.
What kind of horses did they have?
Oh, I don't know what they really were, just ordinary horses in those days, I suppose. They
I
were,
had some mule food, didn't you?
yes, we did have
Had
it.
already.
We had a pair of mules.
When did you get your first tractor, do you remember? Or whatever was the first non-horse implement?
Boy, I suppose, I don't know, we farmed with horses an awful long time, so I expect probably in the 30s, wouldn't it have been, I think.
Yeah, because Henry had a farm hall at F-20.
Now, I remember coming out to that farm when you were picking potatoes, and I like to remember that I was helping, but I'm sure I wasn't any help at all. What else did you grow on that place? Corn?
Corn,
And
wheat,
wheat?
some soybeans. But that was before all these herbicides, and we couldn't keep the weeds out quite as easy as they do nowadays. But
One thing we did when we lived there, and I don't know if your folks did or not, but we used to in the winter, after the softwood froze over, they'd go down and cut big chunks of ice, and we had an ice house.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that old ice house is still, it isn't there anymore, is it? And, you know, they would put the ice in this old house, and then, it was kind of more like a part of a cave, really,
Hmm.
with just a roof, it was down the ground. Cover this with straw, and that's what we used in our ice boxes, you know, then in the summer.
So you didn't sell that ice, it was your own personal, just annual ice store?
It was just, no, just for our own use, and you couldn't put it in, anything to drink. It was just to keep the ice box cool.
How long would it last then?
Oh, I think we replaced it about each day, each morning, maybe at night too, I can't remember, but it would last all day.
But could you store up enough ice to last through the summer?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes, they did.
Did they use horses in to gather that ice?
To pull
With the
it up.
big tongs and
They
stuff?
had, yeah, and they had kinda like a, sled that they pulled it up on from the creek.
So it'd last until it was cold enough that you didn't need it?
Right, it would last through the summer.
And then how would you store food? Did you have a cellar? Or we were hearing about caves at the Mangold store. Did you have something like that?
We didn't have a cave, we had a, and the basement, I guess we just, you know, would go down our cellar under the house. That's where Mother stored all the fruit that she canned in jars.
So canning must have been a huge event.
Oh my, and canned a lot of wild gooseberries,
Wow.
wild cherries, and wild plums. Mother would, have the rhubarb and the, gooseberries, you know, and she would, and then we had wild mulberries, and she put the mulberries and the rhubarb together and canned that, and then in the winter made pies out of it.
Hmm.
It was real good.
Ida, do they know up at the camp that you grew up on the place?
we told
We,
Dave,
Dave Coker, that day we went out for lunch, I told him that I grew up there. So he knows it.
I think it's kind of important that they know that.
yeah, well, that's another reason that we're kind of partial to the camp, you know.
Yeah.
The fact that she grew up there and farmed down there and stuff.
Yeah, you guys have pretty deep roots there. That's neat.
But that's where you found out that you didn't want to be a farmer.
Well, eventually, yeah. I tell you, it wasn't bad. I liked the livestock end of it. I wasn't too crazy about going up and down the corn road all day. But the darn floods, God, we'd average about one crop in 3, you know, and it was proposition spending the money I was making off cattle and hogs trying to raise corn. That wasn't a very good deal. So, then things were kind of tough, and I didn't want to go back to work. So we decided to fix her up with a shop downtown. She's a beauty operator, you know, was. And about that time, Mother bought this place and decided that instead of her driving back and forth from the farm, I was to drive back and forth from here to the farm. And she was going to have a shop in the house here. That's why I tell you that folks liked her best.
Well, I'm lucky to be in the family. I really thought the world of Henry's folks. They were very good to me.
What do you remember most about Grandma and Granddad? You
Well,
personally, we'll come back to him. in a
And
minute.
Henry's dad and I always, you know, joked that he just loved to kid me. And we had a couple of horses, and one of them was named Smokey, and he was the clumsiest thing there ever was. But Henry's dad stuck up for him, really. And I was telling him one day how he was running around the yard down there where we lived, you know, around the fence, and he slipped and just fell right down, and it was so funny. Well, Henry's dad didn't think it was so funny, you know, but anyway, I was up to their house one day, And he had this Smoky hitched up with another horse, and they were putting some cobs in the cob shed. They had a little wagon of cobs. And I don't know what happened, but Henry's dad was backing these horses up to the cob shed, you know, and all of a sudden clumsy Smoky slipped and fell right down. And I went out on the porch, I couldn't hold myself. And the first thing Henry's dad said was, "Ida, don't you say a word." But Henry's dad was, in a way, he kind of reminds me of my dad. He was always full of a lot of jokes, you know, like the kid children particularly. And Henry's dad was really. And then Henry's mother, of course, just helped me so much because I never thought I was ever going to get married, and I was not ever interested in cooking, even though my mother was a good cook. I really didn't care about it. So actually, after I married Henry, she taught me really how to cook, you know, and bake her famous bread, to which I still do once in a while. And so we just.
It took a little bit. I ate some bread that wasn't all that great for a while.
In the beginning.
But I didn't complain.
Good move.
What kind of bread did she make?
It was called wheat graham. You use the dark wheat graham flour, you know, and makes real good toast and other sandwiches. Every once in a while we'd have some fellas that come down there fishing. They'd come in the house and I had just baked, and I think this one fellow almost ate a half a loaf himself. And it is good bread. But, she really did, and I didn't know how to dress a chicken, you know, and of course you had to do that. You had to raise your own chickens, and I got pretty good at that too. She taught me how to cut a chicken up, which I didn't know how, and she taught me lots of things.
No, that's another thing I remember out at that place is killing chickens.
Mm-hmm.
That just came back.
Yeah, we ate real good in those years, you know. A lot of the food was grown right on the farm, you know, fruit trees. Always had a garden
Were you heating with cobs, or what were you using?
and a kitchen stove.
Or the stove too?
Cooking with them, but not
Uh-huh.
eating. We'd eat with wood. They'd always cut wood, you know. In those years, there always was a
That
nice
old
damn
house
tree.
had a furnace in it. They eat with wood chunks.
Mhm. The house where I grew up in.
Yes.
Yeah, it had a furnace.
So Henry, what can you tell us about your folks?
Well, Dad, I guess he guided me pretty well. I remember one thing he told me, he said, "Don't get involved in business with your relatives and friends," which I thought was pretty good advice. And, one thing I remember about Mother, you know, she was kind of plump. And when she laughed all over. It was really fun. And I don't know, I spent a lot of time with Dad. Of course, we farmed together, you know, for years, and even before we moved down there, when he was in the bank and driving around the country looking at land or something, and somebody wanted a loan, why, I'd go along and he'd be driving part of the time, and I don't know, maybe I soaked up some words of wisdom from him. But he was quite a guy.
Now, was he really serious about having a money-making, producing farm there, or did he just kind of like having a farm?
I think it was about half hobby with him.
Uh-huh.
Because, yeah, I think it was about half hobby. Because after we were down there one time, we went to a sale over here by Raymond. And this kid had, I think there were 5 horses. And they hadn't been taken care of. They'd been tied up in the barn. They were skin and bones. The barn hadn't been cleaned up, and they were standing on their head practically on kind of droppings behind them. And their hooves were grown out so far they were curled. And I swear Dad bought them because I felt sorry for him. And he brought them home, and this kid that was working for us down there, he said, "My God, boss, where'd you get those things?" Well, it took quite a while to get them get their feet trimmed up and get some meat on them, but, and they're pretty good horses, we used them quite a bit, but we were in the transition between horses and tractors.
Uh-huh.
Dad bought that Model A John Deere 36 when we moved down there like that one. And so when, of course, I didn't run it for a couple of years. I worked horses because Glenn got to run the tractor. You know, Glenn and Margaret lived down there
Yes.
for a couple, 3 years. But then when they went back to Broadwater, where I graduated to the tractor and put in a lot of hours on that thing.
And what about your mom?
Hmm?
What about your mom?
Well, she was tough, or act like she was tough. Seal had a little black dog one time, and I don't know why they couldn't take care of her for some reason. She wanted the folks to take care of it for a while, and mother about raised the roof. Well, okay, you can bring it out, but it's gonna have to stay on the back porch. They lived right across the street here. And that evening they were in there and sitting in the living room. The pup came in. I think mother had left the door open about that far. And milk and oatmeal and milk and bread, you know, that's what the pup got. So she was pretty tough. She used to take a little nap when television first came out, you know, and these darn wrestling matches were on. She got hooked on them. She'd take a little nap in the evening before they came on, because they came on kind of late. And then she'd watch the wrestling. And she would get mad. Oh, that guy, he's cheating. And some of the things on television now, she would be,
Very embarrassed.
what's the word? Yeah.
So when was the first time you ever saw a television? Do you remember that?
Well, they had one in the window down here, and folks moved in here in 47, and Dad had a television 2 years before he died. Must have been about 48 or 49. About that? Yeah. Those days it was all pretty snowy too, you know. You didn't get all that good reception.
And you know, Henry's mother said, "Oh, we don't need TV. We've got the radio." And she did use her radio a lot. But he insisted, and boy, then when they got it, she just couldn't hardly leave watching TV. She really liked it.
Mother liked good music. And at that time, I forget some program that was on, and they had a lot of dancers like the old Viennese waltzes and things like that. And that was one of her favorites.
Your dad really liked little kids, didn't he?
Yeah, he was a sucker for little kids. I mean, he liked to garden too, you know, and years ago when I was just a kid, and he was, had the lumberyard there in the evening, there wasn't any television or much of anything, and so he always had a garden, put in some time after supper. And one of the neighbor kids came up and was talking to him, and Dad was teasing him, I think, and the kid got throwing clods at him. Dad says to him, he says, "Hey," he says, "did you ever see my horse with the wooden teeth?" The kid didn't say much and went home. Next morning, Dad got down to work. This kid belonged to the guy that run the garage right next to the lumberyard. He came over and he says, "What's this you've been telling my kid about a horse with the wooden teeth?" There were things happened in a little town. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody helped everybody.
farm, did you have hired men work for you? Do you remember what you paid them per day?
Yeah. This one guy that worked for us the longest, $9.50 a week, fed him 2 meals.
Did he eat with the family then?
Yeah. Noon, lunch, and dinner, supper.
When you grew wheat, did you have a threshing crew come in and help?
We did at first couple of years. We had an old threshing machine, but then we got a combine after a couple of years. I think that was about 37. Did we have that before we were married?
The what?
The combine?
We had it when we were married. I
Yeah.
know that.
I think it was about 37 when we got the combine. 37 or 38.
Before that, how many people would come out and help you thresh the wheat?
Well, we'd have a couple neighbors come in, bring a rack, and then it'd be Dad and I and a hired man. We'd have a couple guys, a couple of A-racks, loading up bundles, and thrashing.
So you had a binder, a wheat binder?
Yeah.
And then you'd have to go out and set them up in shocks?
Chalk it up.
That was pretty hard.
Well, it was always hot weather. Yeah, it wasn't so hard, but it was sure hot weather always.
And you ate pretty good when you came in for the midday meal?
We eat about 5 times a day those days.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So you would help prepare the meals?
Yeah, it was a pretty good meal at noon, usually.
Yeah.
Then we'd go out in the afternoon with lunch.
And then they'd have another snack between lunch and supper?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever drink switchel? Do you know what switchel is? That's a drink they used to make out of ginger and molasses and water and I can't remember the other ingredient, but a lot of times I've heard people drinking that.
Don't sound too bad.
Yeah, I guess it would quench your thirst.
Mm.
So what would you make for one of those, say a noon meal for all these hungry workers?
Oh, potatoes and meat and gravy and vegetables. It'd be a regular meal at noon. And then lots of times for our evening meal, Mother, and Henry's mother the same way, would use the leftover boiled potatoes and fry them,